Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm not going to harp on this, but this is one of those old bugger moments. My new pH meter, I mixed up the two calibration solutions, the 6.8, whatever it is, 6.86. I really don't need a second decimal place for flipping growing plants, and the 4, and followed the instructions, and basically, once I'd mixed up those solutions and put the pH meter in there, the reading was so close that, quite honestly, I could have got away with not calibrating that. I gave it a soak for a while before I started, because it says, you know, if it dries out completely, it sort of needs reactivating. So I just stood it in some tap water. But we do have a problem, Houston. These are typical levels that I've used. I'll go back into why that pure water's got a question mark in a minute. But my low level feed has a TDS of 80 and that's giving a reading of 5.9. That's low for a start. Take the TDS up to 120, which is more like my general feed level. We're down at just above 5.8. Yeah? TDS of 220, the sort of thing I'd have in my Vanda bucket, is down below 5.8, and given that the Vandas are getting that every time, they're never getting feed with a pH up around the 6.0 mark, and I think that may have solved some possible problems. You think about it, you know, going back to sort of Rick and the pH swing, some nutrients are absorbed better down at these regions, yeah, below 6, but don't go too mad and shoot down into the 4s, but you know, the 5.5 to 6 range, some nutrients are better absorbed there, but some aren't. So you swing your pH up to around 6 and get the rest in, and hey, we all have a swing. Not that sort, don't go mad. But you see what I'm getting at? Certainly, given my previous readings, when I was actually using low-level feeds, I was artificially lowering my pH because I was under the impression it was quite a bit higher than that. So God knows how low it was going. So whatever nutrients, I'm not arguing over which ones go in at which pH, because it depends on which chart you look at and what sort of plants you're growing and whether you're growing hydroponically. There's so many ifs and buts in there, I'm not arguing. But a general consensus is good enough. Without a pH up around the 6.5 mark, I'm effectively locking out some of my nutrients, and some of those are pretty damn important. Right, now let's go back to something we had earlier. We had a debate on the dodgy Vanda. This one up here. We came to the conclusion it might have had, because it's a hybrid, it might have had a fair old bit of, you know, not cold tolerant elements in it. In other words, really warm growing Vandas as part of it, and it could be cold damage. And we sort of almost excluded the nutrient problem on the grounds that there's 3 of them up there and they all get fed and watered the same, so why are the other 2 okay? But then when you start looking at them, are they really okay? They're a little bit pale, yeah? Whereas this one's a bit darker, but it's got blotches all over it. Bad in some places as well. Well, that's never going to look good again. But quite honestly, if it's not infected or virus, the fact that it doesn't look that elegant, it'll still bloom, and it's the blooms we grow these for. It'll be a lot of years before those leaves drop off and are replaced by leaves at the top. I'll have to live with that. But I can live with that. In here, in my grow room, it'll never be allowed out to play looking like that. If that ever went into a show or anything, they'd take one look at that and just escort me out the building on the grounds it looks like it's got a virus. I don't think it has. The new growths up the top are clean. Yeah, they certainly don't look bad like these lower ones. But yeah, it's just looking round at colours. You know, I mean, strictly speaking, that's a good colour for a Phalaenopsis. Well, it's totally different to that colour. And remember that some nutrients affect the ability to produce chlorophyll. Well, if it's not getting enough of those type of nutrients, then chlorophyll is what gives it its green colour. We could start getting pale yellow, lighter greens. So, my theory of thinking I need to lower my pH a bit now and again has just gone full circle. We need to raise it, not lower it. Now that's simple. If you want to lower pH, you can use some citric acid. It doesn't affect your nutrients, which is what I have been doing, which will stop immediately. Yeah? You've got to think about it. If I'm going to use a pH swing for the Vander bucket, whoops, you don't want to look at that dirty old thing. That's to stop the cats drinking it. But by the way, I did actually catch one of the cats drinking out of the flipping Vander bucket with fertiliser in it, so that's why it has a tray on top. Keep them out. But if you think about it, when I mix up my normal feed level for the Vanders, which they get every time, the pH is low. You know, okay, it's not obscenely low and out of the range, it's just at the lower end. But they're never getting a dunk in water that's got that higher pH to get those other nutrients in. So they would be deficient, and that would build up over time. So yeah, we'll have to think about that. And we'll have to think about all nutrients are important, but when things are actively growing, there are certain nutrients that are far more important at that point in time. And that's where the pH needs to be at that point in time, most of the time. So I'm going to have a play. As I say, though, I need to get the RO unit out. This will be the last time this bucket's used today, when I water the Vanders today, because tomorrow I'll be replacing it with clean water. And that's the other thing I just wanted to go over. Why is the pure RO water got a question mark? Well, having just done some reading and some research, you have one hell of a job getting any pH meter to give you an accurate reading on RO water, because there's nothing in it for it to read, and it flies around all over the place, which is why I put a question mark there. So the pH of my RO water can only be assumed going back to a meter I had a long time ago when I was getting a TDS reading of around 10. Well, I've just double checked that, and it's currently at 11, so it hasn't really changed much, has it? But I was getting a pH of 7, which, if you think about it, once water, mains water, with its high calcium and its heavy metals and all the things you don't want in it, have been taken out, what you're left with is pure water. Well, that logically would have a neutral pH around the 7 mark. And I don't need to know, quite honestly. I only ever use the pure RO water for a flush. And if I was using rainwater, it probably wouldn't be much lower than 7. I mean, I've known some rainwater give very low readings. They tend to be the ones that have also got a TDS reading as well. So there's something in that rain. It's picking up something on its way down from the sky, through the air, and getting into wherever it's being stored. It's getting some stuff in it out of the air. And that can give you a TDS reading, but the stuff is unknown. Could be all sorts of things. Could be blinking foul chemicals from a nearby industrial unit or something. But anyway, I have known rainwater with you know, quite low pH, so it's coming down out of the sky already a bit acidic. Very rare rainwater is alkaline. It turns alkaline when it hits the ground, depending on what the ground is. You know, you get the chalky areas in parts of the UK and things like that, and limestone areas. That's where it picks up the calcium and rockets the pH of the water up into the alkaline bracket, which we don't want for our orchids. There's very few that like that, very few. So running on the law of averages, my low level feed, which I was just about to use, I'm going to now up that pH and get it up to 6.5, 6.6. On the grounds, my plants haven't had any of that for quite a long time. So I'm going to get some in, as they say. But yeah, a little bit of an eye-opener.
I've always been aware that when you add fertiliser to water, although they've got buffers in them and things like that to help out, it nearly always drops the pH down, but I wasn't aware it was dropping it that much. So we'll put a stop to that little game. Not always. I mean, you know, these readings are fine, but not all the time. It's too low all the time. I need to get it up. So we're going the other way now. Instead of using the citric acid to drop the pH, we can stop mucking about with that and use the bicarbonate of soda to raise the pH. And if you ever try that, it works, it's fine, it's stable, it doesn't mess up your feed or anything like that. It's quite easy to use. You find it in the baking counter in your local supermarket. It's dirt cheap. You need the tiniest amount. I did this once before to see how it worked. And I had probably about 2 litres, 2.5 litres of water in my bowl, and I put the tiniest pinch. It shot the pH right up nearly to 8. So you need the tiniest little amount to up your pH a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to have a play. At least I now know I've got a pH meter that gives pretty accurate readings. As I said, when I went to calibrate it, it didn't even really... I could have worked with it exactly as it was. It was close enough for what I'm doing. But I thought I'd calibrate it as I'd mixed up the stuff. It's a bit of a faff, you know. You've got 2 spotless glasses trying to measure exactly 250 ml, you know, and then waiting for the flicking stuff to dissolve, and every time you stir it to dissolve it, you can't put the stirring stick in the other glass or you contaminate it, so you have to keep washing it and drying it in between each go. You've just got to keep those buffer solutions pure. It's as simple as that. If anything else gets in there, it will mess up your calibration, so keep everything clean and pure. So I did all that, it's done. And given that the meter was so close, having been, you know, stored and held dry for a length of time, and it still came out virtually right, I think it's going to work, this one. So I will start relying on its readings from now on. And I'll need to use it, because I can't be using water like that all the time. Just some of the time. But at least I now know that whatever feed level I use, whether it's low level at 80 or my higher level at 220, the pH is around the 5.8 mark. So it doesn't need to be played with. It'll be fine. But what I do need is on the, you know, the other feeds that I'm going to use, you know, I need to get it up so that it swings. Low and high and all that stuff. Don't start singing, please, all you rugby people. I know the words, but I'm not singing it. Okay, so that's just an update and a little bit of an eye-opener, but not outrageous. But I bet when I was adding the citric acid and guessing how much I was dropping it by, I bet that was low. Anyway, we won't be doing that again. I don't need to, so I'll never need to drop my pH again. I'll always need to higher it when I want that 6.5, and we'll go from there. Maybe some things will start colouring up a bit. You know, you have a look at what nutrients are used for. Several of them are quite important for chlorophyll production, which is your green. It's your green colour. So pale wishy-washy colours, you know, they have a significance. And you can find out quite easily what bits could be missing if you've got wishy-washy pale leaves. And then you can look this up and find out perhaps why. So we're there now. That'll do, quite honestly. I don't want to get any more deeper or mucking about with this anymore. I just want some known values that I can work with. And I've got those now. I've got a pH meter that when I add my bicarb to any of these to get it up, I know what I'm aiming at. Yeah, so I can work with that. And well, that won't be of interest to many people, but if it is of interest, great. If it's not and you glazed over or shut down, well, sorry, but there are some that are interested in this sort of thing. Now obviously my feed is the MSU fertiliser. Different fertilisers are going to have a totally different effect and you won't know unless you check. You'll be guessing, and the guessing might be fine, it might be a bit off. So for me it was worth checking. Done now, doesn't need doing again. Okay, that's a bit better. I just added a little bit of bicarb. I mean, that's a low level feed because I'm starting with the Masdevallias, Restrepias and things. I always start at the low end, and then what water's left over I can add a bit more feed to for some of those that, you know, need a higher level. So saves wasting water basically. But yeah, a little bit of bicarb, and it was a little bit, took that up to 6.3, a little bit more, took it up to 6.5. So we now have a pH of 6.5. For the first time, probably in a very long time, my orchids are now going to get some of the nutrients they may not have been getting enough of. And I'm doing it gently. Always make changes gently. Yeah, because plants do acclimatise to things over time and can get used to things even if they're not perfect. So I'm not going to overdose on the feed level, but yeah, I'll go round with that on the low feeders, those that don't like salt build up or anything like that, and give them that, and they will now be getting something a bit more of what they might have been a bit short of, and that'll do. Now check the pH of the Vander bucket. That's sat at it's actually sat at 5.8, and it would have been like that for a long time, and it never would have had that higher pH range for quite some time. So we'll be dealing with that. I shall raise the pH of the water that's in there now because I want to do that today, and then tomorrow I'll be changing the water anyway, so it'll be Vander flush time. And the other things that go in the bucket, there's a few other things go in the bucket, not many, but yeah, I'm hoping things as a consequence of getting the pH up in the higher end of the range, and they'll get a few on the trot like that. If there's deficiencies, you're not going to get it all in there at once, so I'll be building that up over time. So certainly the mounts will be the first to respond, yeah, because they get watered much more frequently than the pots. As far as the pots are concerned, it's going to take a while to actually get those nutrients in there. Like I say, it won't do the job in one feed. So for several feeds on the trot now, they're going to get the pH at the higher end and make up for things they may have been missing out on and get them balanced again within the plant. You have to remember that some of these nutrients don't move about much at all, if anything, and some do move around, and you know, their consequences of being a shortfall are relatively noticeable, as are the ones that don't move if they're missing, because your new growths normally suffer. So we'll have a go, and I'll be keeping a close eye on things that don't look quite right and see if there's any changes. In theory, we should see better greens on the leaves over a period of time. Some of these nutrients that they may have been a bit short on are quite important for chlorophyll production, and without that you don't get the good green that you should get on the leaves. So I'll be monitoring this closely and see if I get a noticeable difference. Obviously the first noticeable difference will be on the mounts, because they get fed frequently, and the change should show. We'll see how we do. But those that have not looked good for a while, it will be nice to see those starting to improve and look a bit better. I mean, I can't have a go at not getting blooms, can I? I mean, come on. So I don't think what they've been getting has affected bloom numbers or quality or anything else, but it's going to affect growth more than anything. So we'll see what happens now, and I'll keep you posted. As I've said, this is of no interest to some people. Well, if you glazed over after a couple of minutes and bailed out, I don't mind, but for some people it is of interest. And even if this video gets low-level views, I don't mind. As long as some people get something out of it, I'm okay with it. And we'll see where we go from there. Thanks for dropping by.